Okay, from my side, I just want to say thank you to our German partners and, for bringing also your information so far from Germany to here. We really do appreciate it. But I'm not going to do the acknowledgements now. I just thought after the session, it's always nice to listen to you and to learn some new things, that you come up with. I'm going to ask my colleague, Shaman Wickham, to give us a short summary, just at the end, and specifically when we started, Estienne gave us the purpose of why we are here. We had the different foci, in the sessions. And I think we would just like to see now, so what have we done today? Where are we now? And how do we take this forward? So thank you, Shaman.
I want to stand here because I don't want to do a presentation of the summary. I want to provide a framework for the summary and make sure that you all engage in filling in that framework. Because this is, after all, the dual higher education program conference, and we need to follow our talk. So if I look at the 3 sessions today, in our first session, what we really dealt with, and Eugene particularly spoke about this, is why do we need dual higher education? What is the purpose? What is the rationale? Where does it come from? And I have to tell you that if you have studied education in any form for any number of years, you'll know that there's been a lot of different frameworks for how learning happens and different modes of learning. And what Eugene made very clear to us today is that the theoretical knowledge that one might learn in the classroom does not necessarily translate into the application in the workplace. We need both, and we need them. And I think Antoinette made this point, and others as well, we need them to be learned in an integrated way, not in 2 separate pipelines. They need to be learned in a way that the theory makes sense in practice. So that first session, I think, was very much about the rationale. Why do we need dual higher education? And of course, that was a thread right the way through. We've heard about the benefits, not only to the learner, especially the employability benefits, but we've also heard about the benefits to the employers who make a considerable investment in their talent pipeline and reap the benefits of that. There's also, of course, benefits nationally. The economic growth, well, within the Western Cape, that's a lot of what CHEP's focuses, but we're also looking nationally at training and development and economic growth. I always get really angry when people say to me things like, oh, well, so-and-so could afford to go to higher education and get higher education or a university qualification. It's not about the individual good. It's about the national good, the public good. Education is far more than an individual benefit. Individuals might benefit, but we benefit as a society and as a national development organization, if you like, if we all have equal access to education and we have access to good quality education. And for me, that's what dual higher education is. It's good quality education because you are learning not just to gather knowledge, but to apply it, and for, I love the word, wisdom. Knowing what to foreground in any particular context, how to use any particular piece of information. So our first session was very much on learning through doing as being the rationale for both individual and the greater good. Anyone else got a particular point that they think needs to come under this first session? A point that resonated with you, or that you thought, oh yes, this is what I must tell someone else about your higher education. Any other important summary points about the rationale, the background, the purpose, the benefits? Well, we come back to benefits. But anything about why should we be doing this? Do we have another? No.
Sorry, just quickly, and I'm glad you mentioned it. You were talking about benefits a bit and reaping the benefits and the investment. And I think I've heard 2 or 3 times about the employer making use of cheap labor in a negative context. Now, personally being cheap labor before in my career, I've gone through an apprenticeship program in Switzerland, so I know being used in cheap labor. And looking to employ graduates in future, higher educated graduates or undergraduates, as a business manager, I am okay with employing cheap labor. In fact, there's something I'm looking for. Now, I don't want to bring this to a negative context, but I think it's important that we understand that there's an investment that an employer is doing. 3 years commitment is a big commitment in today's economy of scale. And for that, we are taking a risk, and that risk is given back to us with the benefit. That benefit is relatively low-cost labor, and I'm very glad that you, Alexander, had the cost of 20-30% of normal labor, and that's low in South African context often. But it's not, I want to rectify the statement of cheap labor being negative. I think the cheap labor is something that the business is looking for, and we must understand that that's not something that we have to roll out as a negative. I think it's something that we long for, and we invest in that to make it a more expensive labor in the future, of course. So maybe it's just the definition that we understand differently, but I just wanted to have the rectification of the context that cheap labor is not negatively affected for us in the industry. Thank you.
Any comments? I see that there are some hands up.
I was the one who started it. Thank you for actually highlighting the other side of the coin that should be there to have the whole picture. If I say cheap labor in a negative context, it literally is that the employer gets the student in and just focuses on them adding to the bottom line. At the expense of the other part that you've just mentioned, the investment of the company. So if I say cheap labor, I literally mean the student is almost treated like a slave. They don't really get anything out of it. So no offense, Nick.
It seems that we're on the same page.
Yes.
Ultimately.
Very briefly, I want to agree with both of you. And I think, if you think of it, the student is the one that's learning. And they actually pay universities to learn. We don't consider that as cheap labor. They cost us nothing. They're an income for us. So if you apply the same rule, you could argue that they should be paying the company to work there as an intern to get the experience. Okay? No, because then there's a value proposition on both sides. So I don't have a problem with the cheap labor, in fact, because I think if you look at whatever you pay, it's a good value proposition for the student because the students are there to learn in the first place and they're prepared to pay to learn in the first place. The companies are doing the student a favor, in fact, to accommodate them to learn additional skills. You could make a good argument that they should pay for that, they should pay the company for that. But I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying I'm happy with the view of them not being paid like you would pay a full-time employee.
I mean, what that seems to be saying is that we have to clarify roles and responsibilities and to manage expectations so that when we put these various models in place and people start participating in them, they know what they bring to the party as well as what they take away. So that was session 1. If I go on to session 2, that was the DHEP team, speaking particularly about the project itself, the progress we've made, different features in the project as a whole and the current status. We spoke about the integrated nature of those different features, and I think that comes across throughout the day, that those different aspects, policy for instance, is integrated in how we actually implement. So we're not going to be able to implement, even our pilot programs are going to be challenged with implementation if we don't also look at policy. But I think here is where, in this session, the importance of partnerships and collaboration really came to the fore. But the complexity of having so many stakeholders. And we got another one during the course of today, the Department of Labour. We had already started seeing the mismatch, if you like, between labour legislation and higher education legislation. And we have been told, as part of the research, is that those two ministries will be speaking to each other. In fact, we're not sure that that has happened. Incentives such as tax incentives have certainly been bandied around, and there have been some tax incentives for employers, but not enough. The question of student stipends, the question of student insurance while they're at work. Are they being employed and are they on the employer's insurance? And we've already had debates within our team about that. Maybe the students must go get their own insurance. Maybe the universities must make sure that they have students' insurance. So the complexity of bringing so many stakeholders to the party, the dual higher education party, has really been illuminated a number of times. And I think it came up in today's session where we looked at all of those role players. It's not just the universities and employers. In fact, that's what our conceptual framework in some ways says. We need to further develop that to show all the additional stakeholders and role players. I think what I'm taking away from that session, models need to be flexible. That was always, I think, our understanding, but we may have to highlight that even more. Another thing I'm taking away from the UJ question, new assessment models. How are we going to assess ethical considerations? We had a little talk earlier today, and we spoke about providing students with a scenario and getting students to respond to that scenario. The scenario would include an ethical dilemma, and then you would have to see how the student responds to that, whether they're taking the complexities of that ethical dilemma into consideration and how that would influence their action. So new assessment modes, really important. And remember that a lot of our academics have never studied education. They don't have a theory of learning. They don't even understand different sort of epistemologies. They go in there with knowledge of their fields, knowledge of the discipline or subsector within their discipline. So capacity building that we heard about, especially in this last session, really very important. And then the incentives that we need to make sure are in alignment between labour and education. There was a question about advisory boards. Well, I think it's more of a comment. We certainly looked at the advisory boards during our research. The conclusion, to put it succinctly, was they're helpful but they're not sufficient. And that's the same with the professional bodies. They're helpful but they're not sufficient. And sometimes, in fact, there isn't even a very good collegial relationship between the academics and the professional bodies. They have different ideas about what their qualifications are meant to be doing. I think the quiz that we completed that session with, that was based very much on our conceptual framework looking at knowledge, skills, and I think we used the word attributes in the quiz, or competencies. And I think it's clear from the answers there is a lot that can be improved. And dual higher education provides us with one way, not the right way for everyone, but one really good way of being a game changer in the South African higher education context. What else should I have put in session 2 as being really important that we should take forward in our reports? What else resonated with you from hearing it from the project team about what's been achieved and where we are now? Any comments from yourselves if you think back on that session? Okay, maybe I'll comment it all.
The one was the skills for the future, for emerging careers. That should be considered in the curriculum. And something else which I think that was mentioned, which is really important, is the movement of students from one university to another and their credits not being acknowledged is a big limitation. It is something the university should take to heart and do something about, so that we can have freedom of movement virtually after any year of study amongst the different universities with full acknowledgement of that year of study. I mean, this is being very pedantic to say we're not going to acknowledge what you did at another university. Those are two things that stood out for me over and above what you said there, Sean.
Thanks very much. And those, of course, are not necessarily embedded only in the dual higher education projects. It's across various other projects and ways in which we are currently providing higher education. And if I go on,
I don't know whether this will be important to everybody, but it resonated with me. It's a comment that you made, that as we go down the process of mapping the dual education nature of the structure of a program, that at the end of the day, the documentation that we develop will become manuals that will serve as the blueprint for the future. For me, that's a very important point. Because if somebody does something now and goes through a heavily intensive process and labor intensive, they go away tomorrow and leave a vacuum. So that is good to note that we'll have manuals that can use.
any last additions to session 2? Then let's go on to session 3. And here, I mean, the first session asked why. I think the session 3 asked how, or was addressing the how. How do we actually do this? And we had 2 really great practical examples. We've got CBS practical example on how they go through the process, and then the City of Cape Town. So let me just speak to each of those very briefly. The whole time the City of Cape Town representatives were speaking, I was thinking of what a colleague of yours had said to me when I approached her. It was about 2 years ago when we were doing the research, and I said, Elizabeth, who can I speak to in the City of Cape Town about internships or things that look like dual higher education? And she said, Shannon, we know a lot about that. She said, what I tell people who say they want a job at the city, I tell them, do an internship, you'll get employment. And I think that's what you said. I said, you're nodding. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is something that we really need to know about. We must know how you do it, so that when we have completed the research phase and we're developing the terms of reference and the manuals and the quality assurance, we must know how you guys do it. We must learn from you. And I then spoke to 2 of your colleagues, and really, Eugene used the word illuminating for your session, and my interviews with them were illuminating. When you see the amount of work, or the amount of preparation, I suppose, and the continued monitoring and supervision and assessment and evaluation and reflection and liaison. It was really illuminating for me. So again, that's what I was thinking about when I heard the two of you speaking. The various things that employers need to think through if they're going to be part of this partnership, and the time, the efforts and commitments that it will take to be a true partner. Thank you for really telling us all of that. I think one additional thing your colleagues told me is that the mentoring that staff do in the city of Cape Town is factored into their KPAs, and confirming that. And that provides considerable levels of accountability. And I thought that there was something that we would take forward in our own work.
I just want to add with the Cape Town, if you will mentor.
It's part of your KPI.
Yeah. No, I think, but it's not without its challenges. I mean, people also told me that sometimes the best mentors are the more senior people, but they're also the busiest people. And therefore, finding the time for them to do this kind of work is not easy. And then, Alexander, thank you for once again speaking at one of our DHEP events. And I think the message that came through very clearly for me was investment in your talent pipeline has advantages and benefits. And the one advantage that I think came through very strongly for me was what you call the competitive advantage. You know, you're building people who know your company, who have a kind of allegiance, if you like, to the company, who know the company in its various sectors or subsectors, because the young interns or students move around within the company. And that brings us back really to the whole point of the dual higher education program, student employability. It was mentioned right on our very first slide. And the concept of employability was something that we researched during the research stage of this project. It's not the same as employment. So getting, I see people agree, it's not getting a job for your students. It's very different to making your students employable over a long term. And I'm also going to say that that term soft skills comes up quite often. Universities say that they provide soft skills. I think what we've learned through the dual higher education project and what we've heard today, soft skills aren't enough. You know, soft skills are one thing. But if we're talking about critical reasoning, synthesizing knowledge, distilling key points, foregrounding some things in background, that's more than soft skills. Those are hard skills. And my belief is that they actually take years to develop. So there are a whole lot of levels within the soft skills. You don't put together a package and give people the package and they've got soft skills. It's a very long period of time. And then the last point I want to mention, and it's something that I'm showing my children, they're 18 and 19, and at that horrible age, where really they're not children or adults. The diagram that shows the correlation between skills and employability. That's the more skills you acquire, even though they're not necessarily degree programs, the more skills you acquire, the more employable you will be. And the more those skills will be transferable if they're able to come in clusters, as opposed to one skill that is very discrete. So thanks very, very much for that. I will be bringing it out at dinner tonight. So that was very much about how do you actually put this into practice, and I think I might have, can I just say 2 more points, or do you want me to hand over to you? Do you have enough?
No, I think we must just hurry up. No,
Okay.
Everybody,
Okay.
you know, certainly will be done by 3.
Okay, so my final takeaways. And I'm picking up on the words that we used. Mismatch, I think. Did we use the word mismatch? There's a mismatch of concepts. There's a mismatch of modes of learning. There's a mismatch of the different kinds of knowledge. There seems to be a lack of understanding that knowledge is not static. We know that. So we've been talking a lot today about how different things are changing, AI, etc. Knowledge is not static, it's constantly evolving. So what we are learning needs to match those requirements.
Thank you very much, Shaman. You see, this is the type of people I have in my team. And this is what we've seen here today, that every person in this room came with their qualities, with their wisdom, with their knowledge, you know, with the way we say things, the way we articulate something, and somebody else hears that. And we take it and we move forward with that. I want to start with the participants that didn't necessarily present or had a specific role in this conference today. And I want to say thank you very much for taking the time and coming. And most of you that started this morning are still here. And that says something about the quality of the discussions here. And, you know, how important this matter is to all of us. So I really want to thank you from the depth of my heart that you came today. Then, of course, Eugene, you know, since Eugene became our CEO, we felt it was like a fresh breath of air that was pumped into CHEC. And from day one, we realized that Eugene is going to be a force, and please do not take him lightly, because he's not 6 foot or 4. They say dynamite comes in small packets. And so, Eugene, today again, you have started with a provocative presentation. And I must just tell you this, that we had a keynote speaker, and unfortunately she couldn't make it. And then Eugene just seamlessly took a presentation and he started off with that. And he went on and he saved the day. And I want to really ask you to put your hands together for him. Thank you. Then, of course, I have to also say for the rest of my team, Estienne, I think he is the other dynamite. Because all the branding that you've seen here today, all the technical stuff, all the logistics, you know, of putting everything together and putting all the stuff on a folder and helping the process to facilitate the process. Estienne has helped us. And whenever we wanted to go a little bit off-road, you know, we get distracted, then Estienne say, can you come back now? And for that we say thank you for what you've done today. It was absolutely perfect. The technology worked very well, so thank you so much. Yeah. And then there's somebody that's very quiet normally. And you've seen her today, how she quietly moves around, you know, and the next moment she's here, the next moment she's there, but you never see her move. It's like she flies there, you know, and then she moves here. Agatha Africa, She is, I always say, you know, she's my left hand and my right hand. And sometimes she just takes over. You know, so Aggie, thank you. I'm sure most of the people here already have had contact with her. And we are really privileged to have such an efficient person doing our administration of this project. Thank you. And then I want to say thank you to my partner for a long time now, my German partner. You know, this is very interesting. Joseph, was it? I don't think you were present at that first workshop. It was the Duhala Hochschule that was here. But then Joseph came in, and I must really say, and I must tell you today, Joseph, you have really made a difference in the project. And you have really helped us to access so much knowledge. And I think you could have seen today also with the way he facilitated this section. Thank you for that. And thank you for all the assistance that you've given us. And now I must say this a little bit, but Joseph and I wrote an article together on this dual higher education project until now. And what we have achieved until now. And today he handed over the hard copy of this publication. So, in German. In German. But that's another thing, you know, in other words, giving us that opportunity that we could also publish, in this case in German-speaking countries, so Austria and Germany. And that is also something that we probably wouldn't have been able to do if it wasn't for your connection. So thank you for that as well. And then our colleagues from CBS, specifically Alexander, I want to say, because you know, Alexander is the face of CBS here in South Africa. And I think he's the voice as well, because we have a lot of discussions on WhatsApp. But thank you again for sharing your knowledge with us today and telling us more. And thank you also for all your contributions up till now. And we believe that even after this project ends, we are sure that CHEC and CBS will continue to collaborate and take the whole idea of the dual higher education further. To all of you, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you that we could learn from you. Thank you that we can take these lessons now, go reflect on them, and also look on how can we take this forward. Where do we go from here? And to you who have to travel, safe travels. And to you who are South Africans and have to drive home, please drive safely. And God bless. Thank you.